hoped, right?
What were you thinking? What was your idea of how these top achievers think and perceive their life? And then when you went to interview them, you were like, oh, this is completely different.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because I've also had a chance to, like, business leaders has been my desire. Entrepreneurs has been my desire. But I've also had a chance to become friends with a lot of big movie stars. I've also had a chance to actually coach some of them on their businesses. And many of the top thought leaders in the world are close personal friends of mine. So with some of the movies that we've done, Bob Proctor, Jack Canfield, Joe Vitale, John DeMartini is one of my best friends, Bob Doyle, like all those guys, they're all close friends of mine. And it's interesting, before I kind of made connections to a lot of these people at high levels, I would often put them on a pedestal thinking, wow, they must be incredibly special and talented. And in many cases they are, no kidding. But the thing that they have more than talent is just a specific outlook on life, where they're very, very persistent. They're very teachable. And so they're always looking for people to learn from. And they are very quick to make a shift if something's not working. In fact, one of the favorite moments that I had was with a fellow who started on welfare and became the 25th wealthiest man in the United States. And he's featured on the cover of Forbes a handful of times, a gentleman by the name of Bill Bartman. And I'll never forget, he said to me once, he says, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. And I thought that was just a brilliant idea. And he says, I'm always looking for people smarter than me to learn from. In fact, here's another thing, is I was in the living room of Bill Farley once. And just to kind of share for your listeners who may not be familiar with his name, he was the former CEO of all of Fruit of the Loom Underwear. He also, for a time, owned the Chicago White Sox baseball team. He won the Horatio Alger Award, for contributions to the world. He's a multi-billionaire. He also owned many other companies for a time, or was on the board of directors, people like Christian Dior, Jordache Jeans, Chitano Sportswear, California City. The list goes on and on. This guy's a really smart guy. Anyway, so I'm in his living room and we're talking about business. And I shared to him this really cool business idea I'm thinking of launching. And I want to know if he's interested to get involved. Well, needless to say, he doesn't say yes or no. What he says is, he goes, let's hang on a minute. He picks up his phone, he dials it, he says, can you send in the team? Well, all of a sudden, 5 or 6 people come in from all kinds of different doors. And he says to me simply, he goes, explain the idea again. So I explain it, and each one of them is listening attentively. Then he just asks each of them their opinion. And they each share exactly what they thought of this business idea, either why it will work, why it won't, some ideas that we need to consider, their feelings.
That sounds like a Shark Tank.
Kind of like Shark Tank, right? Almost like an immediate mastermind, in fact.
Yeah.
Right? And then all of a sudden, he still doesn't tell them his opinion. He simply says, okay, thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. They all get up, they leave. Then he turns to me, and then he shares his opinion. And it's interesting that I've heard this before. You've heard it said that, success is all about learning to be a good listener. But I don't think that that's exactly correct. A better way that I would phrase that, success is about being the last one to talk. In other words, we get all the information we can possibly gather. We get all the insights that we can. And now anytime we're looking at, say, a business opportunity or an investment or fill in the blank, the idea of risk is no longer risk. It's now a matter of evaluation, because we've got information. We can process it now. And if we get information from experienced sources, our ability to then evaluate it becomes even stronger. And so that's kind of been something that I've noticed with a lot of these people, how they really think and operate. They operate from their gut. Many of them go from a gut feeling. They don't wait for the numbers to come back in the lawyers, but they do get expert opinions before they really jump in full speed ahead. And I think because they do that, they just live their life a little differently. And so I've tried to kind of emulate that as well. It's funny. I hire people and I don't tell them what to do. I hire people and I express the outcomes that I desire, but I leave the processes up to them. I was actually chatting with Bobby Turner last week. He was the regional president of Whole Foods. He was in charge of like 45 stores and also in charge of bringing products in from new entrepreneurs and all of these things. And as we were talking about that people don't fail. People make mistakes. Processes can fail. And that's why sometimes we need help building better processes. So when we get people, if you dictate processes and say, this is how you have to do it, blah, 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 and it doesn't work, you're the one to blame because you gave the roadmap, right? You created the parameters. But if you tell a person what they can do, well, they might make mistakes, but the reality is if they're given the freedom to make mistakes, they're also given the freedom to fix them. But if you give them process and they make a mistake, well, they have to stick with your process, no matter how bad it is. So we've got to understand that top achievers think totally different when it comes to making things happen.
Do you think we have good books about this, or is this something?
No. In fact, as I interviewed 400 of the world's top achievers, I found that the majority of the gurus that are out there today, the people coaching and speaking and teaching, are completely wrong. Most of them have learned their information from someone else's book. And that's just like, and even the books that are written are often from someone else's book. So it's basically getting a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of someone's bad ideas. In fact, the thing that I found in going directly to the source and interviewing 400 top achievers, I had a lawyer come up to me once at one of my events. And he said, you know, if I had to prove something in a court of law and I had one witness, that's pretty good. He said, if I had 3 witnesses, that's even better. If I had a dozen, no problem. This is the truth. But he said, you've had more than 400 witnesses to what success really looks like, especially in business and entrepreneurship. And that's where I teach. That's my area of my lane. And so he said, more than anyone really that I know, you have a clearer view on what creates business success than anyone out there, because you've interviewed 400. But not only that, is I've done it. I don't know if you were aware, but when I was 19, one of my mentors, well, many of them I learned from, but one of them really took me under his wing, and that was Frank McGuire, one of the co-founders of FedEx. And he became like a grandpa to me. And so as I started launching my business, I had all these multimillionaires and billionaires I could turn to for advice. And it's not a big surprise, but in 6 months after launching my first business, I was able to do $1.6 million. Now, a lot of people say, wow, that's excellent for like a young man in his early 20s. But the reality is I just listened really well to the excellent mentors that I had. And so if you're asking about these guys who are out there teaching it, well, again, most of them have, like most business coaches today, are totally out of touch with what's going on today. They're operating from a traditional business model of brick and mortar, or of local business, or of business hours, or of hiring locally. They're doing such things as the rules and regulations of traditional business. We don't roll that way anymore, right? Everyone's online. In fact, last year, there was some statistics that came out during the pandemic that because traditional business doesn't work in a pandemic setting, that there were more than 548 million new entrepreneurs last year. That's 1.5 million a day became entrepreneurs. And no kidding, I was chatting with someone, in fact, yesterday, about the importance of, you know, getting a good business coach. And somebody mentioned in a comment, well, I've got 30 years experience. You know what, that actually works against you, because you can't teach an old dog new tricks. If you bring some, like, what's 30 years? Okay, so if we look at 30 years, that means they started coaching in 1990. That's pre-internet. So if you've got a business coach that's still thinking pre-internet and they're trying to help you be successful today, you're actually tying yourself down to archaic rules that don't work. And so you can't do that. And this is the problem with so many people in personal development and business coaching. They stick to these ideas. Like you hear, for example, here's a good one. People always say, you've got to hustle, you've got to grind, you've got to wake up early and be part of the 5 a.m. club and stay up late. You've got to take massive action. Well, that's actually super stupid, because the reality is we've only got so much, we've got so much bandwidth, and it's not being busy that makes business. So here's my philosophy is you don't take massive action, you take deliberate action. And have you noticed that any of those so-called gurus who tell you to hustle, they never tell you what to do during that time. They also don't tell you the sequence in which you should do it, what's going to be most effective for you. They also don't tell you how to assemble a team. So the reality is, as an entrepreneur, you're not supposed to be doing everything. In fact, think of it this way. An entrepreneur is like a conductor for a symphony. If he gets off the podium and starts trying to play every instrument, he runs over to the bass, he runs to the violin, he runs to the bassoon, he runs to the tuba. The song is going to suck. It's going to be terrible. But if they know how to orchestrate by picking the best players for each section and the best people, and they train them in the music and they get them all on the same page, and then they conduct, well, now you've got a symphony. And that's how entrepreneurs are supposed to run. A solopreneur is not an entrepreneur. A self-employed person is not an entrepreneur, and a small business is not an entrepreneur. They're very different. And the thing that's really kind of interesting is when I did the Harvard Business School's entrepreneur program, they pointed out something interesting. They said the average solopreneur, the average small business, the average self-employed person, They can literally serve 5 people. And then when they get to number 6, everything kind of suffers because they just don't have the bandwidth, right? But the problem is small business owners or solopreneurs try to do it all, and therefore they have very small businesses, right? Another thing that is told by all these entrepreneurs is by these gurus to business owners today, they say you need to get out of your comfort zone. That's absolutely crap, right? You don't. There's so many things I'm not comfortable with that I'll just not be able to do. So the reality is you don't get out of your comfort zone to do crap that doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to go learn how to build a website or learn how to build a blog or learn how to, like, I'm going to stay in my lane and get very good at it because people pay me for my expertise. Mastery equals monopoly. That's the reality, not comfort zone. So what I do is, instead of getting out of my comfort zone, I get into my brilliance zone. I find out what I'm really, really good at. And the things I'm uncomfortable with, I delegate. And the only place I should be getting uncomfortable is in the area of my expertise, because everything else does not pay me. I can find people, I can hire out. And especially nowadays, we can hire from anywhere in the world. So it's, you know, some of the ideas that are taught are just incorrect and foolish.